Welcome to our leadership series, co-hosted by Sanford Inspire and NCUST. My name is Amanda Rothengast, the program manager for Sanford Inspired, and we are honored to be co-presenting this series to support school leaders or aspiring school leaders in such challenging times. The opinions and content in this presentation are that of the featured speaker and panelist and may not necessarily be a direct representation of Sanford Inspire or NCUST. This is a recorded webinar in our series designed for you to watch at any time. We also encourage you to share it with your colleague. It is my pleasure now to welcome Dr. Joe Johnson, Executive Director of the National Center for Urban School Transformation. Welcome, Dr. Johnson.
Thank you. Hello and welcome. NCUST, the National Center for Urban School Transformation, identifies, awards, and studies schools that achieve outstanding learning results for all students. We're pleased to welcome you to the second session of Reopening Schools with the focus on SEL and Equity. By the end of this series, we hope that participating schools will have stronger, more complete plans for how they will ensure a socially, emotionally healthy reopening in a way that advances true equity in learning outcomes. As you continue through each session with us, take note of strategies shared by our panelists. You'll be asked or you'll be invited to submit a one-slide presentation outlining one aspect of your reopening plan based on the concepts discussed throughout this series. If selected, your slide will be shared in the last live webinar where our panelists will provide feedback. Today's session emphasizes the importance of including in reopening plans deliberate efforts to listen to students as well as other stakeholders. The third session link will be emailed to all registered participants on July 8th and will emphasize the critical importance of designing action plans that respond to the needs of all students and all demographic groups of students. The fourth session link will be emailed to all registered participants on July 15th and will help everyone think about how their reopening plans should include provisions for building the capacity of everyone to respond to various social, emotional needs well. In the first session, we emphasized why planning for reopening is so important. A recording of the session and presentation slide deck was sent to you via email. Before we proceed, Ms. Rothengast will recap some of the major points addressed in the first session.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. The previous session emphasized three major points. First, we discussed the significance of the disruptions and trauma students and adults have endured from prolonged exposure to upsetting events such as daily media coverage from the pandemic, emphasizing the growing death toll, increased infection rates, and conflicting messaging from government authorities. Economic uncertainty from the loss of family, income, housing instability, food instability, uncertainty about when or if economic stability might return. And recent images of race-related violence and civil unrest broadcast by the media, causing many to worry about the possibility that they or a loved one could become a victim. And loss of stable routines caused by the events above that have provided stability and comfort. Secondly, noted by school psychologist expert Dr. Jenica Paz, she reminded us that we cannot afford to ignore the impact of the trauma as we reopen our schools. She explained that many students and educators will return to school with the quote, invisible backpacks full of heavy stressors. Finally, Our panel of expert teachers and principals described many ways educators should begin planning to help individuals quickly unpack these stressors and maximize the chances of success. In particular, panelists emphasized that screening instruments can be helpful tools to start unpacking. Building relationships and trust is crucial. Finding ways to listen and demonstrate care is more important than ever. Educators need to plan to help students feel safe in sharing what's inside their invisible backpack. While we're increasing social distancing, we have to find ways to decrease emotional distancing. Schools can help students manage stress, build empathy, and feel safe, especially in these troubling times. Finally, schools should consider how they can develop multi-tiered systems of support that respond to students' needs, nurture optimism, model understanding and acceptance rather than punitive approaches, and encourage a growth mindset. These resources were shared by Dr. Paz in last week's session and are included here as well.
Thanks, Ms. Rothengast, for that thorough recap of the first session. In this session, we'll focus more specifically on how teachers, school, and district leaders can plan to listen and learn about the social emotional issues that students, families, and staff are enduring. We are so fortunate to have an amazing group of panelists to inform our discussion. Today's panel includes winners of the 2019 Sanford Teaching Award. These individuals were named the top inspirational teacher in their state and qualified for the honor of being named the nation's top inspirational teacher in 2019. Our outstanding teacher panelists include Linda Amici from Alcott Elementary in Westerville, Ohio, Sarah Freyer from Woodbridge International School in Washington, D.C., Leah Jelke from Fargo South High School in Fargo, North Dakota, Claudine James from Malvern Middle School in Malvern, Arkansas, and Laura Thompson from William F. Cook Jr. Elementary in Hockessin, Delaware. Before we jump into practical suggestions for how teachers might plan to listen to the social emotional issues that might concern their students, let's talk for a minute about why listening is so critical when there's so many other things for teachers to address. Ms. James, why is it worth taking a little instructional time to listen to students' concerns? Give us an example of how you've managed to make time to listen to your students.
Yes, I think one of the main reasons why we need to listen to our students is because we need to let our students know that we care. And when they see that we care, then they can become calm. One of the hardest things for even as adults to do is to focus when we're having other issues to deal with. And I think COVID-19 has taught us that we all need to listen to each other and do away with the little small things so that students can get down to learning. One of the things that I've personally done in my classroom, because I'm an English teacher, is design writing prompts to allow the students to express how they feel. During COVID-19, this past April, when it was National Poetry Month, I was actually given the opportunity for my students to write poems talking about how they were dealing with COVID, and the poems were printed in the local newspaper. When I returned to school, one of the things that I plan to do if we are in session and in session to see each other face to face is to have a journal, such as the journal that I have from Stanford, is to have this on the side of my desk. And so that when students have concerns, then they can address those concerns with me privately. Lay this journal down and ask for permission to get a hand sanitizer and pick up the journal and write me a note. Also, I extend the opportunity for students to send me individual emails, either through Google Classroom or through my regular email, to address concerns. But I honestly believe before we can be very impactful in our teaching, that we need to help our students feel comfortable in the surroundings that they're at. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. James. That's an excellent answer. It's all about caring. Ms. Jelke, how have you managed to make time to listen to your students?
So as an educator, I believe that our job is to teach the whole child. So during my class time, anytime a student can come up with a concern, I teach refugee and immigrant students in a sheltered instruction setting. So it's a classroom of 20 students from all over the country, high school students. And so a lot of concerns come up daily. And so I make our classroom a very comfortable place for students to be able to talk about different concerns. And one way to do that is to really start off the year talking about how you're a team in the classroom. And being a team means every day you bring respect and a positive attitude to the classroom. And those are the two things I tell my students to bring every day to class. And then going off of that, I always have a student designated as a class leader each day, and it rotates. And so those students then feel empowered to help run the class at the beginning of class. They start the class, they stand up in front and they tell us what we did the previous day. They tell us what we had for homework, and then they also help out with anything we do, passing out materials or anything like that during the day. So giving students empowerment like that, they feel comfortable in your class to share their concerns. And then you have to give them that time and space. And doing that, I have monthly conferences with my students during my prep time, or sometimes during the class time if we have time. But I like to reach out to my students as high school students when they have a period off and they come in and discuss with me. And one of my questions I ask is, what can I do to help you in my classroom? And a lot of students who've never had me often are taken aback and think, what do you mean? Why are you asking me? But that's what we have to ask our students. What can we do to help you? And I think when you start with that and open up that conversation in a private setting with a student, you learn so much about each student. And when you learn more about your students having these conversations, that's how you can better teach your students, and that's how they can better learn.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing these really practical ideas for making your students feel comfortable. What about you, Ms. Freyer? What are a couple of strategies you and your colleagues have found useful as you try to create a safe space for students to share their concerns?
Okay. So one of the key thing to do is just to make sure that you open all channels of communication. And one of my favorite things to do is I have a concern box in the classroom. And in the beginning of the school year, it's a big deal, and we decorate it, and I let them know, like, I really need to know your concerns because I value what is on your mind. And at the end of the day, students will put different concerns in there, and I let them know that they can sign their name or they can keep it anonymous. And at the end of the day, I go through the concern box. And if I see a trend of the same type of concern, I bring it to the students in morning meeting in the beginning of the next day. And then I let them brainstorm different ideas. So they get in groups. I tell them what the main concern is that I saw, and they get into groups and they brainstorm different ideas or ways that they can solve that concern, and then we all bring it back together. And there is on YouTube, you can look it up. My class and we got interviewed for this event. We did this brainstorm, and I was doing this, and the students were talking about, it was in 2017 when Hurricane Harvey in Texas happened, and that was a big concern that I kept seeing in the concern box. And so when the students went out into their small groups to talk about their concerns and brainstorm ways to solve it, they came up with really great ideas. And we started off with just our classroom raising money, then it turned into the school helping us, then it turned into a community thing, and then we got interviewed for it, and we were able to help a school in Texas. It was Thompson Elementary in Dallas, Texas, and it all was just for that, having them to talk about their concerns. Another thing that I do to help students with concerns that helped me is to have lunch bunch with them or after school to talk to them. But the key thing to remember is to give students a safe place to voice their concern and protect them while they do that. And what I mean by protect them while they do that is to let them know that everyone's concern is okay and that everyone has a voice to speak.
Wonderful answer. Thank you so much. Let's turn to Ms. Amici. What do you do to help your students know you are willing to listen to them? What are some specific things you do to help students know that you care?
Thank you. Well, I think if we don't really know what concerns our students, it's really difficult to help them to move beyond those concerns. And I have 6 children of my own, so I'm keenly aware of the fact that these children we have the opportunity to work with today are really going to be tomorrow's leaders. And so I feel like it's just this urgent sense of working with them and helping them to voice their concerns, and then taking those concerns and helping to amplify their voice. If we can help them to identify, acknowledge, and really analyze the issues that they're concerned with, then we can empower them to be the change that they wish to see in the world. So I really like to help them to create solution-oriented ideas and to really help their brain to think in more solution-oriented ways. I think that's an important piece to help our world to be better, not just now, but in the future. I have a lot of stories, more stories than we have time for examples, but I'll just pick one. Students in my care create personalized project-based work. And based on their own driving questions, they share their research findings with their class and then beyond their class. And I remember a student named Lauren who was working super hard to answer her driving question, which is, let me see here, I wrote it down actually. What causes Down syndrome and how can we prevent or cure it? And when she was done sharing with the class, there's always an opportunity for her classmates to ask questions. And she was asking, what questions do you have? And a student named Julia said, I remember you saying that students who have Down syndrome have a difficult time feeling connected with their peers that don't have Down syndrome, and they just feel disconnected. What are we going to do about that? And there was just this pause. If you can imagine, the bell rings right then, and it's 12:30. I've got 29 hungry 5th graders, and they didn't move. They were all thinking, what are we going to do about that? And they began to brainstorm and think. No one moved. There's another class waiting to get in the room to switch, and they wouldn't move. Like, they were so like, what are we going to do? We have several specialized learning centers in our school. And so they took the time to brainstorm. I had to stop them and say, no, we have to go to lunch, you guys, but we'll come back and we will revisit this. And we did. So after lunch, we reconvened, we brainstormed some ideas. The students wrote a letter to one of our specialized learning teachers. She helped us get in touch with some of the students that had Down syndrome that attended our school. And then my students were able to work out a plan where they were able to go and work with those students. I really feel like advocating for students and their voice and empowering them to be able to make a change and make a difference is an important way that we can really help students to understand that we know them and that we care about what concerns them.
What a wonderful example. Thank you so much for sharing.
Wow, thank you, teachers, for sharing such amazing ideas. At this time, we encourage you to pause the recording and take a minute to note 2 or 3 ideas you've heard from our panel of teachers on how to listen to the social and emotional issues students may bring to school this year as you plan to reopen.
We hope our audience is taking good notes for their upcoming assignment. Let's continue. Ms. Thompson, how can school leaders help teachers with this? What are some specific steps that you would recommend they take to support teachers in taking time to listen to students and families?
Thank you so much, Dr. Johnson, for this question. The biggest concern for school leaders in order to help teachers be able to take the time to listen to students and family is an element of time. That's something that we often talk about. And I have a few ideas. A couple of them are at the district level for district school leaders. One thing in my professional learning network that we've talked about at different times are the possibility of, say, a 4-day school week, so that there are 4 days of school. On the 5th day, it's the opportunity for deep cleaning of the facilities, but that's also the opportunity for teachers to really reach out, connect with parents and families to help make sure that those communication channels are open. And also, half-day schedules are something that's being considered at this time to help reduce the size of the classes, the number of children in the classes at any one time. And again, that half-day break gives that opportunity for specific connections. The other ideas are more for school level leaders. For instance, the master schedule. I had a colleague who mentioned that really more than ever, we need some time built in for hand washing. Because right now, when the schedule goes from one academic subject to another, teachers feel almost like they're cheating when they need to take some time for things that are needed, for instance, like hand washing or other health related issues. Some other colleagues have mentioned providing extended morning meetings so that the time that we normally had, maybe 5 to 10 minutes, we have much more time to get into deeper conversations with the students. Or perhaps in the beginning of the school year, a colleague had suggested using the social studies block of time to be able to address issues about social distancing or maybe processing images that they've seen of violence in the media. With this, though, with that scheduling, it's also important for school leaders to be able to trust their teachers and allow them that flexibility to respond in the moment. Because we all know that for students, needs that they'll have won't necessarily be only during our scheduled times. So being able to know that we might have to have a conversation or a circle of conversation so that we can really get to the depth of maybe a perceived injustice that a student has just thought of in school or in the world. Some teachers have had suggested a guidance block that would be similar to our music education time or art education time. But I could also see that if the school counselor or the school psychologist is providing a lesson to students, it would be an opportunity to help build teacher capacity as well, the classroom teacher. And I'm so excited that we're going to talk about capacity building in a future seminar, in a future webinar. I am also concerned, though, because for all of the needs that students have, they won't all be able to be addressed in the larger classroom. So we have to be able to, school leaders need to be able to give teachers that time to address the needs of students in small group or in individual situations. And failing the allowance of that time, we may need to have more personnel, as Dr. Paz suggested in the first webinar, that we might need more school counselors or more school psychologists to help address those needs. So I'll kind of sum it up, because time is the greatest concern. Some of it is addressed at the district level, for instance, with major scheduling issues, but then some of it is in the master schedule in the building. It's important to recognize that if we can come up with a time in the day that we can designate for social emotional needs and learning, then children will know that at that time of the day, they will have that opportunity to express their concerns. That will help alleviate a lot of anxiety for some students as well. We have to remember that we're teaching children, and we have to remember that we need to meet their needs, but we also are involving adults like the teachers who might be experiencing their own social emotional needs. And having a plan, that's why this webinar is so important. Developing that plan goes a really long way to help support teachers and staff in feeling safer and more capable in listening attentively to their students and to their family needs. Thank you so much for the opportunity to respond to this question, Dr. Johnson.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. That's an excellent answer. Time is just so critical, and leaders play such an important role. Today, we're fortunate to have two outstanding award-winning principals. These principals lead schools that are winners of the America's Best Urban Schools Award. Even though their schools serve low-income communities with all the challenges we associate with urbanicity, every demographic group of students in their school outperforms statewide averages for all students. I'm pleased to introduce Lauren Malhoit, principal of James Deanda Elementary in Houston, Texas, and Alexis Sorden, principal of Concourse Village Elementary in Bronx, New York. Principal Sorden, amidst all of the attention that will be given to physical health and safety and major academic needs, what are 2 or 3 specific things that you recommend principals do to increase the likelihood that all adults know that you need them to prioritize listening to students and families?
Hello, thank you, Dr. Johnson, for that really awesome question. So as a school leader, the first thing that I'm going to do to increase the likelihood of the adults in our school building prioritizing listening of students and families is for me to listen to them. So we're going to set up in our main office where we always come in to check in, how am I feeling today? And it'll be great, good, okay, or I need a check-in. So our teachers and our other staff members will do that so that I know who would need a check-in for that day. And then as the leader, I will also structure school-wide community share sessions that are, and I say structure intentionally, so that we're able to just communicate how we're feeling, so the teacher will be able to take quick notes on how are we doing today before she starts the lesson. And then she jots it down, and then students also have the opportunity to say if they need a check-in. So that's something that they would decide on their own. And once the teacher's able to get the class situated, then she'll know who she needs to check in for that day. But even prior to beginning any instruction, one of the things that we'll do at our school is what we call BIG, which is an acronym for breathe deeply, initiate your intention for the day, and get ready to have a great day, so that we are able to get students breathing and so that they're able to be present in the moment. For grades 3 to 5, we'll also provide them with an opportunity to write in their journal. So it's a journal where they just get to dump and just express anything and everything that they could potentially be holding in, and they'll use that journal time, which will be 5 minutes at the start of every day. And then for our families, we would like, we're going to use our guidance counselor, our social worker, our parent coordinator, and our main office staff to conduct check-ins with them as well. So via phone calls, via Google Forms, where they could express how they're feeling and if they need check-ins with us, and if so, how often, and if not with us, should we get services from the outside to provide families with the support that they may need. So those are just some ways that we've already started to consider how do we increase the likelihood of the adults in our school building prioritizing listening to students and families. Thank you for listening.
Excellent answer. It shows that you have really thought about how you can make this happen throughout your school. Principal Malhoit, what's your perspective? Talk to us about what school leaders should do to support teachers in taking time to listen to students and families. What are 2 or 3 things you're planning to do to support your teachers in doing this?
Thank you for that question. So I think it's no secret that our teachers wear many hats. You know, not only do they teach, but many times they serve as nurses, counselors, and so much more. And I don't think many of these roles are going to change or disappear anytime soon, especially as our world continues to face new and sometimes traumatic challenges. We as school leaders need to ensure that our teachers are well equipped with the correct tools and strategies that will help support their multifaceted roles as those continue to evolve, especially during these critical times. So first, I think it's critical that school leaders support capacity and growth for teachers by adding new and responsive tools to their toolkits. School leaders can provide teacher trainings that are responsive to the needs of the students and of the schools that they serve. Even as simple as blocking out time and scheduling required professional development around providing social emotional responsive supports could be one way. We can't necessarily assume that all of our teachers have had social emotional training around trauma or high risk needs. And this can be done by leveraging school counselors, but also by leveraging citywide and community departments that have really rallied together during these times to support our families during COVID. Next, our school leaders can block out specific times in their master schedule to allow teachers to connect and to call home and talk to families, parents, and students. One concern that teachers, and myself included as a teacher, we often feel we never have enough time. Even Ms. Thompson said earlier in this webinar, she affirmed the need for more time. So it's critical that as school leaders, we build our master schedules this summer to be cognizant of the time that will be required to provide these social emotional supports. And then once we talk to our students and families and we have professional development around training and we're actually having conversations, we want to make sure we follow up. Very analogous to what we do with our students pretty much every day by tracking mastery with state objectives. And then we create targeted interventions and supports that are action oriented in order to gain a better result. I would recommend that we do the same. If we're assessing the students and families' needs, we should write it down. We should assist in creating social emotional targeted supports with action plans. An idea that we used on our campus when COVID-19 first hit and we first became virtual was creating a tracker by students with basic areas of food, technology, emotional concerns, housing, and so forth. And with a simple yes, no click and an opportunity to add comments. And as the families or the students needed supports, we kept a log and made sure that this tracker was kept only by the teacher, the admin, and the counselor who needed to see it. As the teacher could address the supports needed, the teacher would. But if we needed to leverage other partners in our school or our community, we would do so. So those are some ways that we can support our teachers during this time.
Great answer. So I'm going to ask you to extend upon that by talking a little bit more about the other school personnel. How can other school personnel play important roles in listening to the concerns, fears, and other feelings of students and/or families? And your plans to reopen, what are 2 or 3 specific things, I know you've mentioned some already, that you're doing to engage staff other than classroom teachers in listening to students, families, and teachers?
Sure, and thank you for that question again. There's a quote by Robert John Meehan that said, "The most valuable resource that all teachers have is each other." And I would beg to say that the most valuable resource our schools have is each other within the schools, not just at teacher levels. So I think the first step would be really leveraging the school community, using some of the similar steps that I mentioned before by providing and creating opportunities around professional development, supporting social emotional needs of families and communities that particular schools serve. Oftentimes, my front office will act as the same as teachers, nurses, counselors, and then a different variety of capacities. But we need to make sure that they have those supports in order to talk to families and talk to students. I think another thing we can do is leverage the supports that our teams have. So not just our teachers, but if you have a front office clerk who might be well-versed in internet and how to gain resources for access, or if you have a clerk who is bilingual and they can support the translation with families, that's really important that we leverage these during those times. So equipping our staff with the resources with PD. I think a second step is also providing resources to parents regularly and resources that are not just available at the school, but at the district and community levels. So in Houston ISD, we're actually very lucky to have quite a plethora of district supports. And we want to make sure our families know about those supports. So one support our district has is HIC at Home, which is a curriculum supporting students virtually. So we have one person on our campus who serves as our at-home liaison, but the district also sets up supports. Our district also has an emotional support hotline, and that's critical to have the hotline, but we as a school and campus need to push out that information through social media, phone calls, and other ways that we communicate with our teams. So I think it is critical that our teachers aren't alone in this, that we continue to work with all of our communities to be able to support our families and our students during this time.
Thanks so much, Principal Malhoit. It's great to have these practical ideas for how school leaders can engage both teachers and other school personnel in helping listen to students. But what about the social emotional needs of the adults at the school? Principal Sorton, what can school leaders do to provide safe places for school personnel to discuss their feelings and concerns? What are your plans to provide safe spaces for school personnel to discuss their feelings and concerns? What recommendations do you have for other school leaders?
So this is another great question, because many of us have to think about what our school buildings look like moving forward, especially when we are reconfiguring class sizes so that we meet the CDC requirements. So thinking about physical spaces for these conversations to take place is critical. And as a school community, we started talking about where those spaces would be. And we're able to use our school counselor's office as one of those spaces, the principal's office as that space. And we're currently redesigning a small space in our community where it's not used often, but we're calling it the Reset Lounge, so that it's a location where you're listening to a lot of positive energy music. The lights are somewhat dim. We're getting bean bags and just creating a space where you could reset, re-energize. So knowing that this is something that's going to be crucial for everyone, we're always talking about how do we create those spaces for children, but now we're looking at it, how do we create those spaces for our staff that's going to need to reset often so that they could continue to do this important work, which is support our scholars. So our guidance office, our social workers office, my office, and the Reset Lounge will be spaces where our staff will know that it's safe for them to share. And right outside of our door, we're going to have Velcro, and we're going to post a note that says a share session in progress. Please do not disturb. Thank you.
Great answers. I love that so many of the things that have been shared today in terms of listening have been about the importance of time and the importance of space, so that that listening can occur in a way that makes everyone feel valued. Today, I'm pleased to be joined by my colleague at NCUST, Dr. Jose Iniguez. He serves as an executive coach at NCUST and has many years of experience in various roles in schools and school districts. Dr. Iniguez, what are some of the practical suggestions that our panelists have offered? What might our audience incorporate into their reopening plans that would increase the likelihood that students feel listened to, cared for, and valued?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me with you today. As a brief summary of the strategies that were just discussed by our expert panelists, teachers, and principals, the strategies include, and remember, this is not an exhaustive list, but they include establishing a designated schedule to listen to students and staff. This may take a variety of forms, including communication circles during class, a modified instructional schedule, or even outside of the conventional class when staff have time to call families. Another strategy was establishing a social emotional daily check-in protocol for staff and students. This too may take a variety of formats, including an informal check-in with staff in the main office and allowing them to follow up with Google Forms as needed. Another strategy was is rather providing staff with appropriate resources, including toolkits and training that helps facilitate meaningful conversations with students. Another strategy is increasing personnel to increase the school's capacity to listen to staff and students as well as families. Another strategy is leveraging all the staff that one has, not just teachers, to help listen, reach out to, and support students and families. Another strategy is creating social emotional learning objectives and monitoring progress. Another strategy is facilitating safe environments, both physically and emotionally, for staff and students to be vulnerable to discuss their concerns. Another strategy that was mentioned is allowing students to contribute to the instructional planning. This may include presenting a problem to a class that might be solved in a collective manner, in a solution-oriented manner as well, and maybe even creating personalized project-based goals, allowing students to express issues or topics that concern them and engage in a productive struggle about it.
Excellent. Thank you for that great summary, Dr. Iniguez. Our panelists offered so many specific, important ideas, but now I have one last question for you. What are 2 or 3 specific things district leaders can do to elevate the importance of listening to students, families, and school personnel about the social and emotional issues they are confronting in these challenging times?
Absolutely. I'll share 2. One was mentioned previously, and people use different names for it, but I think as a district leader, one of the most effective things that the district can help with is to establish a dedicated healing or listening center at each site that would help listen to students, families, and staff. Depending on the availability of funds, this is where district leaders can help. District might consider even having perhaps a separate healing center for staff, but again, that all depends on facilities and funds. Or if you use the same facility, help designate the specific times that you may want to set aside for staff so they are not in there at the same time with students. Obviously, the healing centers can be used for structured dialogue with groups or even individual assistance as needed. Healing centers can even be created virtually or in an actual classroom, but there are quite a bit of funds that would have to be involved and a lot of planning of logistics, for example. What are the funds that are going to be needed if in fact you have to create or a space, purchase a portable or even repurpose your current room? Then there's also the matter of compliance that district leaders can help with that principals don't necessarily have time for, like making sure that it's compliant with all related codes and laws, such as ADA compliant. Another idea that district leaders can certainly help with is establishing a district-wide approach or protocol to listening to students, families, and staff. A district-wide protocol is important because at times it may be that staff members may feel that it's more important to immediately address other pressing issues such as learning loss, but establishing a district-wide focus really helps to emphasize that. And the district can help with all related matters in this case, such as training material, funds that are available, establishing designated training days, things of that nature. But there is one particular approach that I would like to mention that would help. It was mentioned previously, but that is the matter of restorative practice, the restorative practice framework that I referenced in the slide. This approach encourages staff to get to know their students and families beyond the context of the classroom, which often sheds light on underlying and unmet needs. This approach is dynamic and it incorporates a variety of needs. One of our panel members, for example, mentioned circles. There's a variety of circles, everything from communication circles that as well as circles that build up into increasing complexity of feelings and sensitivity based on the comfort of the facilitator. For example, a restorative circle may be used when students perceive staff members themselves as the source of implicit bias. The slide that I referenced there actually has an example of student support circles where students actually speak to that. But those are 2 examples that the district leaders can help with.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you for that those great ideas for what district leaders can do.
Thank you all so much for sharing your wonderful ideas. At this time, we ask our audience just to take a minute to pause and reflect how you might incorporate the ideas discussed today into your planning. Please take a minute to pause and then join us for the closing of this session. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this webinar during your busy schedules. Just a reminder to check your emails where you registered on July 8th with the link to the recording for the third webinar in our leadership series, Developing an Action Plan, Responding to Social, Emotional, and Academic Needs. Also, if you do have any additional questions about this series, please do not hesitate to reach out to me at sanfordinspire@nu.edu. Thank you so much.
And thanks to all of the distinguished panelists, our award-winning teachers, award-winning principals, and executive coach Iniguez. It's so easy to see why you are such amazing, award-winning educators. And thanks to everyone in our audience. We hope you return for the upcoming sessions in this webinar series. We look forward to helping you plan for a school year that supports every student and every demographic group of students in ways that will lead to social, emotional, and academic success. Thank you so much.